Hello everybody. If you just found this video on YouTube, welcome. If you're coming from my Discord server, welcome. This video is actually for you. First of all, I'm so happy to see so many of you join the Discord and so many of you participate in that startup of it. That's really awesome. I'm very grateful. In the time zone poll, those of you who voted, I can see about half of you is from the US and the other half is in Europe. I really wanted to do live sessions with you because I counted on you asking immediate questions. And now, however, I'm thinking whether that's even going to be possible with two time zones like that. What do you guys think? I think we can either host two live sessions at two different time zones, but you guys will have to decide on what time would be best for you. Or I could pre-record the next session for you to watch and then ask questions. I'm not gonna lie, I would prefer the live session because I could get to know you all, which I think is very important. But secondly, because that would allow you to work in sync and also ask questions immediately as they crop up. The better feedback you have, the better you learn. I'll leave it up to you to decide. I think I'll create another poll for you to pick a suitable date. Right, and the skill voting. Again, thank you very much for participating. The distribution of your skills is actually exactly what I was hoping for. It seems to me that I managed to gather an ideal starting group for the whole program. If, however, by any chance anything feels to you too fast or too slow, please let me know in the comments or in the Discord. I'll try to adapt so that the pace is appropriate for all of you. The information and knowledge I'll be sharing with you comes from my experience and also the experience of leaders in the industry. Mainly, I will be using the practices that come from these books here. Continuous delivery, DevOps Handbook, Extreme Programming, Test-Driven Development would probably be the most important ones. If you'd like, you can read any of those. You won't regret them. However, you don't need to read them because we'll go over everything that they contain in our sessions. Now, remember when I said that the start might be slightly different to what you might expect? It's going to be like that. I promise I'll get into the creating applications part as soon as I can, but I need to move some myths out of the way first. We have quite a lot of new novice programmers in our party, so this bit might be a little slow for their sake, but I believe quickly we'll all get up to speed. The first presentation is about the nature of software development and the myths that surround it. In order to explain what I mean, I need to put it into contrast with other jobs in our society. I'll categorize the jobs based on certain aspects of them. In the zero category, there are jobs that apart from learning them, they need to be repeated. That means in order to service more people, you need to repeat the activity. In the first category, the main thing that you're getting paid for, though, is just doing it once. So for example, we have a dentist. He heals people's teeth. I will put him in the zero category. He obviously needs to go to the medical school and learn how to heal teeth, but once he learns that, he will need to repeat his practice for each of his new patients. Of course, there are different kinds of teeth, but if he learns them, say how to do a root canal in your bottom fourth, he then knows it, and he can keep healing that same bad tooth for everybody. Compare it to somebody like a book writer. He might spend a year writing a new story or a novel and then print it and sell it to a lot of people. His work style is very different to that of a dentist because once he writes that book, he will never write that book again. That's the important difference. The dentist will heal the same tooth again and again, but the writer will not write the same book again. He might of course write another book, a different book, but that second book will be very different to that first book. Now we have a barber. He cuts people's hair. Where would you put him? Well, there are different hairstyles of course, but once he learns a particular hairstyle, he can give that hairstyle to like 100 people, but only if he does that work 100 times for each of his clients. So he goes into the zero category. Later, we have a painter and an artist. He paints masterpieces on a canvas and sells them. If he were like a wall painter and he had the same job in different houses, he'd go into the zero category. But he's in the first one because after he paints a masterpiece, he will probably not paint the same masterpiece again. Next guy, a driver. He could be a taxi driver or bus driver. He needs to learn how to drive and get a driver's license, of course. But once he learns city streets, he will repeat the same job over and over again. He will move passengers from point A to point B to today, and then tomorrow he will move different passengers also from point A to point B. He will keep repeating the same routes. So he goes into the first category. Coming up with a builder or a carpenter. He can build furniture, tools, or even whole buildings. What's your guess where he belongs? Well, if 50 companies want the same building, does he need to build that building once or 50 times? He will have to build it 50 times, so each of his clients gets one. So he goes into a zero category. That's very different to somebody like an architect. To be sure, I don't mean like a software architect, I mean like a regular old building architect that designs buildings. He will be approached by a company to architect a building, let's say, with a hole in the middle. Where do you think he should go? He will spend a month or two designing that building with a hole in the middle, but once he's done and he's approached by a second company that wants the same building, do you think he'll just create it again, or he'll just reuse his models that he got in the first place? Next, we have a movie director, somebody like a Ridley Scott or Quentin. He directs movies. Quite obviously, if he directs a movie once, he doesn't need to direct the same movie again, so he's in the first category. Moving on, we have an experimental physicist. He makes experiments and inventions in the lab. If he invents a new element or a new method of synthesizing something, will we need him to invent it again? Probably not. Just one invention is enough. That does his whole job. So he's in the first category. Next, we have an actor, a theatrical actor, not a cinema actor, the kind that performs on a stage in a play. Would you like to take a guess where he goes? Well, if he learns the lines and performs for an audience on Monday, and then another audience would like to see him on Tuesday in the same play, can he just copy his performance? Or he has to perform it all over again? He would need to do it again, and then again the day after that. So he's in the zeroth category. Next, we have two interesting ones. One is a tattoo artist, and the other one is a tattoo designer. Tattoo designer creates a project of a tattoo on a paper with shapes, colors, and makes them look pretty. Tattoo artist then actually puts the ink into people's skin, creating an actual tattoo. Now, where do you think they should go? I'll give you a hint. One of them only to complete his work once, and the other one is paid for each activity and each instance of his work. As you may be able to guess, the tattoo designer is the one who comes up with the project once, and he doesn't need to repeat it. And the tattoo artist is the one who gets to do the same job over and over again on different people's skin. For the big finale, where do you think software developers sit? We were all waiting for that. Before I tell you, let me bring up something first. We'll get back to the previous part quickly enough. But before we do that, did you guys notice that in our society, there's this notion that if you want to do something right, you have to first plan it and then execute that plan? So for example, with building buildings, first we have this architect guy sketch something on a blueprint, do some computer modeling or draw some drawings on paper, calculate the forces of that building, choose the right materials. And he can iterate on that, and he can, if he makes a mistake, he'll just scratch it and correct it because, on paper you can erase it, or in the computer you can just roll it back. And then after that design is done, then he will give that job to the builder who will actually build the whole thing. And he doesn't have to actually invent anything. He just can follow the plan. People who advocate for this style of work usually would say that if we didn't have somebody architect the building, but instead we just give the thing to the guy to build it right away, we will get very low quality building, not as strong, not as high, not as nice looking. And you can see the same approach in other areas. Like maybe first you have somebody like a director or a screenwriter to write some scenario. He can work on it and deal with the ideas and correct some mistakes, shuffle things around. And only after that's done, then he gives that to an actor, and that actor can actually play it out right. You can start to notice that the guys who were in the first category, on the right-hand side in the previous slide, were the one who did something once. These are the planners. And guys who have to repeatedly perform something out, they're usually in this building phase, right? Maybe now you can start to see the link between this planning phase and building phase from those categories from the last slide. Jobs that were in the zeroth category demanded something real, so they would probably be placed in the building phase. The dentist, the driver, the builder. People who did something once, they would be placed in this planning phase, like an architect, a director, a writer. The difference is, people who usually work on something once, they have the privilege of modifying something they are working on. First chapter of a book, a draft of the project, trailer to a movie. They can change their mind in between. They can modify it, squeeze something, move something, replace something as they work, and then they can deliver their final product. The building phase guys, they have it worse because they are working on something that's actually real. If you're a driver, the road before you is actually real. The building that you're building is also real. If you're in the middle of your job, you can't suddenly change the foundation from underneath you. But if you are an architect designing a building, you may very well do that. So, because we want high quality software, we should have somebody who's a designer or maybe a product owner to plan everything for us so that when we actually give the job to the developers, then we know what we're doing and we can work safely and predictably. Let's get back to our previous slide with categories and let's take a look at the programmer here. Because maybe, if he's in the production phase, then maybe he belongs in a zeroth category. Well, let's think about it. Usually, when we have created a new application for somebody and we want to send that same application to somebody else, do we need to code it again? Or can I just copy it? You can probably just copy it. We don't have to write the same application again. Actually, every time you create an application, you write it for the first time. If you need another copy of the same application, you can just copy it. So we don't get that repeated exposure to problems as workers in other industries. So that means programmers are more like writers. We're category 1. We get an option to modify our work. We can remove a feature, add a feature, completely refactor the whole application to something else. It's moldable, changeable, flexible. The work of a programmer in that sense very much resembles work of a writer. We can continuously change every aspect of our application, unlike somebody who has to produce something in the real world. But for that, we pay the price that each time we do something, we haven't done that thing before. We didn't have an option to observe this particular application in action before we start working on it. We didn't see the patterns. We don't get an attempt at a problem we need to solve before we are required to solve it. For each of our commercial work, we have a sample size of 1, and that's only after we have done it. This is different to somebody like a driver who wrote the same road hundreds of times, or a dentist who did the same tooth hundreds of times. Plus, we, as programmers, don't have a production issue. Well, what does it mean? If a writer needs to distribute a book, he needs to give the book to a printer, which will actually take some time to print that book. So writing a book would be modeling, and printing would be production. But with programmers, the very moment we make an update to the software, it's already there. We can make a change in a website, and it's already in our users' hands. Building architect, the one that designs buildings, first does the modeling, and then the builder in production phase constructs it. With software, it's almost as if an architect did a change in a blueprint, and that change magically manifested itself in a physical building. That would be amazing, right? And that's exactly what software developers do. We very often update live systems. That's essentially the same thing. Software development is the modeling phase. And when developer finishes the model, which is the code, it's already done. There is no production phase for developers. We push a button and it's there. That's why this is such a serious myth, because it's hard for people to leave a gap here. The developer is the final piece in the software development, so many people mistakenly assume developers are the constructors in the production phase, and somebody else does the modeling. And from that myth, a lot of bad practices come. The idea that you can estimate software, measure productivity, all that crap. So with that, I should just wrap this video up with a summary of everything we've talked about. So with software, we always code something new, because had we coded it beforehand, we would have just copied it. Devs have no production phase, because if we want to send something to somebody, we can just copy it and send it. We never have a need to write something again. The myth that I was trying to protect you from is that the development can be foreseen preemptively. That's the myth. That's not right. And the truth is that trying software out is just cheaper than trying to predict it, because it's the same thing as trying to model, like an architect models a building before building it. The only difference between us and the architects is that they have to pass that model to a constructor to build, and we don't.
And I think that the things that I'm talking about in these optimizing for learning, optimizing for managing complexity, are principles on which we could start to build a genuine discipline for software engineering in our profession. I think we in our industry have a dramatically significant advantage in that if you're building, a bridge or a building or something like that, you probably computer model it to do all of that stress calculation, all that sort of stuff. And you'd test the model and all that kind of stuff. Our model is the real thing. Yeah. So there's no empirical discovery that's required after that. The other significant, magnificent advantage that we have is that production for us is free. So once you've done all of that discovery and learning and design, and you've got your sequence of bytes that represents your system, however big or complicated or distributed it is, you press a button and you clone those sequence of bytes for essentially free. And I think that's a dramatic advantage that we have. And so I agree with Simon that software development in general is not yet an engineering practice, but I think that we do know some of those principles. We just haven't pulled them together. Yeah.
That's the biggest difference between the two worlds, right? If your building fails, you're looking at the cost of constructing a new one, whereas in software, you can make changes to something you already built without sinking the whole cost again into the same project.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Well, most of the time.